Friends, you're on the Ruslan Belov channel, and today, June 20th, 2026, we're going to walk through a very eventful day. There really is a lot to cover, so let's get straight to it without a long introduction. But before we begin, the usual request. Please subscribe to the channel and be sure to tap the bell, turn on all notifications. The thing is, YouTube continues to suppress the reach of this channel's content, and far from all of you actually see new episodes in your recommendations. An active bell and your subscription are essentially the only way to be sure you won't miss the daily briefings. Leave likes, write comments, that directly helps the channel break through the algorithms. And of course, a special thank you to our sponsors and to everyone who supports the channel through super thanks. Without you, none of this work would be possible. Now today we'll change the usual order and begin right away with the front line, and only then move on to the broader news agenda. Let's go. And the most important sector today is the Kostiantynivka-Sloviansk agglomeration. The Russian army continues to press toward it from every side and along every sector, and it is here that the fate of the entire eastern flank is now being decided. Speaking specifically about the Kostiantynivka axis, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation today provided updated figures. According to its data, Russian units managed to advance through another 94 structures, and the fighting is gradually shifting toward the city's northernmost and northwestern outskirts. That said, it's worth noting, over the past 24 hours, no footage showing flags raised over new positions has been published. Various pro-Russian sources are making minor adjustments to the map, but there have been no substantial changes confirmed by objective control footage on this sector so far. So we treat these figures as a ministry statement rather than as a verified fact. Nevertheless, the overall dynamic suggests that pressure on the city itself is mounting, while the defending unit's room to maneuver is narrowing. And where genuinely important, confirmed adjustments are coming from is the area of Maiske, east of Druzhkivka. This is how the map is changing on this axis today. Footage has appeared showing FPV drone strikes on the Russian army's forward positions. Based on the geolocation of these clips, it can be assumed that Russian units are now focused on straightening the front line between Chasiv Yar and Kostiantynivka. The zone of this straightening includes settlements such as Stinky, Podilske and Chervone. By all appearances, a localized battle for this sector is about to begin, and there is a high probability that the Armed Forces of Ukraine, AFU, will be forced to withdraw from these positions. Given the current configuration, the Ukrainian formations in this pocket are already in a semi-encirclement, and possibly even in an operational encirclement. Holding such a salient almost always results in elevated losses. Supply runs along roads under fire, and the routes of withdrawal gradually shrink. So a decision to pull troops out of such positions is usually only a matter of time. Once the front line is straightened, the Russian side will most likely continue advancing along a broad front toward the key heights opposite the Druzhkivka-Kramatorsk-Sloviansk agglomeration. Let me remind you of an important terrain detail that largely shapes the course of the fighting on this axis. All the settlements of this agglomeration lie in a lowland along the Kryvyi Torets River, whereas the positions to the east and southeast sight on commanding heights. The highest points here are considered to be the areas of Rai Oleksandrivka and Chasiv Yar. They literally loom over all the settlements from which the advance toward the agglomeration is being conducted. Control of such heights confers an enormous advantage. Observation, fire correction, and the ability to sweep the approaches to the towns below. If a few more of these heights are lost, holding Druzhkivka, Kramatorsk, and Sloviansk under pressure from the Russian army will become practically impossible, and then the question will no longer concern individual settlements, but the fate of the entire agglomeration as a whole. East of the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration, there is information about an improvement in the Russian army's positions in the area of Yurkivka. This is how the map is being adjusted here over the past 3 days. The Russian side is not only advancing, but also consolidating on the Ukrainian bank of the Siversky Donets-Donbass Canal. This is an important line. Waterways and canals traditionally serve as natural defensive barriers, and a foothold on the opposite bank means this defensive line is gradually losing its significance. And again, note this. All these positional improvements run along those same strategic heights that loom over the agglomeration. That is, the advance is developing not chaotically, but according to the logic of seizing the dominant terrain. Lyman deserves a separate mention. Footage was published today showing the movement of Russian units directly through the city. In other words, new clips have appeared confirming the Russian army's firm control over Lyman. At the same time, there is still no footage from the westernmost part of the city. Apparently, pockets of resistance from the AFU remain there. Judging by the nature of the fighting, this is already a matter of rearguard action, and the purpose of holding this bridgehead for the Ukrainian side is to allow as many units as possible to break out of isolated pockets of encirclement in the direction of the Siversky Donets River. This is a classic situation of covering a withdrawal. Small groups hold positions for exactly as long as the main forces need to retreat in an organized way. Once this withdrawal is complete, the Ukrainian formations will most likely abandon the western part of Lyman as well, and only then will the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially confirm full control of the city. The fall of Lyman, in turn, opens up additional opportunities for the Russian side to apply pressure on the northern flank of the entire agglomeration. That's all on the front line for now. Let's move on to the broader news agenda, and the first important piece of news comes from the waters of the Black Sea. Today, both pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian outlets report that a cargo ship that had departed from the port infrastructure of the Odessa region was attacked while already in Romania's territorial waters. According to the available information, the attack was carried out by a surface uncrewed vessel, that is, a naval drone. I'll stress that this report has not yet received independent confirmation, and the attribution of the strike remains tentative. Nonetheless, if we set this alongside other cases, then since the beginning of June, several similar attacks on cargo ships have been recorded along Ukrainian and near Romanian territorial waters. If all these episodes are indeed connected to the use of uncrewed surface vessels, then we can speak of the Russian side gradually attempting to establish control over the northwestern part of the Black Sea. And that, in turn, could amount to a gradual restoration of balance in the region. After the Russian fleet was earlier forced to shift its main forces to Novorossiysk and southern bases. For civilian shipping, incidents like these mean rising insurance rates and risks for commercial traffic, which in itself becomes a factor of pressure. The second piece of news concerns a statement by the President of Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky has effectively issued an ultimatum to the Republic of Belarus. According to him, along the Belarusian-Ukrainian border, there is certain equipment that is allegedly used by the Russian side to coordinate and guide strikes against Ukrainian territory. Possibly this refers to signal relays. Zelensky, in ultimatum form, proposed pulling back and removing this equipment from the border, and in the event of refusal, after a 10-day deadline expires, the Ukrainian side states it is prepared to remove it on its own. Judging by the tone of his remarks, Minsk will most likely reject such an appeal, which means that in 10 days, the situation on this axis could escalate noticeably. In addition, in the same speech, Zelensky called Belarus one of the largest suppliers of petroleum products to Russia, including for the needs of the armed forces, hinting at the refineries located there as potential targets. There is no direct pretext for a strike at the moment, but the rhetoric on this axis is clearly shifting, and any involvement of Belarusian territory in the conflict would be a serious escalation with unpredictable consequences. And now to a major international topic that has once again come to the forefront: Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. Several important developments have occurred here over the past few days. On June 17th, the United States and Iran signed a Memorandum of Understanding, a framework agreement, mediated primarily by Pakistan, that provides for a 60-day period of direct negotiations aimed at reaching a broader deal. Under the terms of this agreement, the Strait of Hormuz was supposed to open immediately to commercial shipping, and traffic did indeed begin to recover. According to maritime analytics services, around 25 vessels passed through the strait on Thursday, the highest figure since roughly mid-April. Let me remind you that under normal conditions, about 1/5 of all the world's oil shipments pass through the Strait of Hormuz, so any instability here is instantly reflected on the global fuel market. However, by Saturday, June 20th, the situation changed sharply. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced the renewed closure of the Strait of Hormuz citing, first, the continuing Israeli strikes on Hezbollah in Lebanon, which, in Tehran's view, violate the first clause of the memorandum on the cessation of all military operations, and second, the United States' failure to meet its obligations to enforce that clause. The Iranian side warned vessels to refrain from any movement through the strait until further notice. At the same time, it's important to present the other side as well. U.S. Central Command disputes this statement, asserting that Iran does not control the strait and that shipping continues. According to industry specialists, the central fairway of the strait remains effectively closed. There are, by various accounts, about 80 mines still requiring clearance there. But the northern route through Iranian waters and the southern route through Omani waters remain passable. Meanwhile, around 550 merchant ships have accumulated in the Persian Gulf, awaiting safe passage out. Among them dozens of tankers, bulk carriers, and container ships. Experts warn that even if the truce holds, normalizing shipping will take months. The safety concerns are too great, and confidence in the agreements remains too fragile. Against all this backdrop, negotiations between the US and Iranian delegations are due to take place in Switzerland. They were originally planned for Friday, but because of the flare-up in Lebanon, the meeting was postponed, and according to the latest information, it is now expected on Sunday at the technical level. In other words, we're looking at an extremely fragile structure. A signed agreement, partially resumed shipping, and at the same time mutual accusations of breaching the terms, which could bring the entire process down at any moment. Much now depends on whether the Lebanese track can be linked to the Iranian one, since it is precisely the situation around Hezbollah that is currently serving as the trigger for all the complications. For the global fuel market, this means continued high uncertainty, which means the Hormuz topic will return to the agenda more than once in the coming days, and we will keep following it closely. And now, briefly, on the mutual strikes over the past 24 hours. On the night of June 20th, the Russian side deployed, according to the Ukrainian command, about 99 drones, and on the night of June 19th, around 90. These are the lowest figures of the week. For comparison, just 3 days ago, the number was 246 aircraft. Such a sharp decline is apparently linked to stockpiling. With a daily potential of about 250 drones, only 90 were actually used over 2 nights. That means a reserve of around 300 aircraft, plus the current day, could have accumulated. This is indirectly confirmed by the fact that large groups of drones have already begun entering Ukrainian territory, from the Bryansk region toward Kiev and over the Dnipropetrovsk region toward Kropivnitsky. Everything points to a massed strike being expected on the night of June 21st. In terms of target selection, the picture is unchanged. In the southwest of the Odessa region, the hunt continues for fuel tankers and gas stations along the M15 highway. A strike was recorded today in the area of Sarata, and similar strikes earlier occurred near Monashi. This artery, running from the direction of Reni and Ismail, remains under tight fire control. In the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions, gas stations and logistics along the Nikopol, R73 and onward 808 routes came under strikes, as did a Nova Poshta terminal in Zaporizhzhia, which, according to Russian intelligence, was used for drone-related work. Zaporizhzhia itself, by the way, has begun to be actively covered with protective netting. Farther north, near Hubernica, a gas processing infrastructure facility was damaged. On the Kharkiv axis, an Su-34 strike on an Ukrposhta warehouse in the northwest of the city was recorded, and along the Kharkiv-Sumy line strikes continue against gas stations and industrial sites in the areas of Bohodukhiv and Trostianets. The Ukrainian side, for its part, carried out ranging strikes deep into Russia on the night of June 20th. Isolated impacts were recorded in the area of Gukovo, and during the day, according to the governor, an attempted drone attack was repelled in the area of Tyumen, where an oil refinery is located. Judging by its nature, this was a reconnaissance in force, and on the night of June 21st, the Ukrainian side will likely attempt its own massed strike in parallel with the Russian one, including trying to reach the refineries in the central part of the country. That's how eventful today turned out to be. Thank you for watching to the end. Subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and take care of yourselves. All the best to you.